Hello everyone, welcome to my ranking of all of the Thomas specials. This is something that I had wanted to do for a very long time, and some time ago I decided that I would also like to rewatch all of the movies at once for this video, so that I could have, so that my opinion could be as fresh as possible. And because of that, I had also decided not to watch any of those movies until I was about to make the video. So it's probably been more than a year since I've watched any of the movies, and now I'm going to watch all of them in the fastest time possible. I'm probably going to record this over several days, maybe even weeks. It's probably going to be like one movie per day, maybe more, we'll see. And also, I am not going to watch just the main 14 specials. I am also going to watch the 4 Boaba mini specials, and the 2 All Engines Go movies, and the All Engines Go our special The Great Bubbly Build, which I have actually never seen before, so I'm going to watch it for the first time for this video. I'm pretty excited for that. So yeah, and after I review them all, I am also going to rank them. Something worth noting is that the thing that is going to count the most for how I rank them is personal preference, basically how much I enjoy them. So, for example, if there is gonna be any movie which has more issues than another movie, but is going to be more enjoyable, then I am going to rank that first movie higher than the second one. And lastly, I am not really going to edit this video because since it's going to feature over 20 specials, it's probably going to be pretty long and editing all that would be a nightmare. So there's not gonna be any screen caps from the specials, I'm just going to put some chains here and talk like that. So it might be better to put this video in the background while you do something else if you get bored of that. So without any further ado, here is Thomas and the Magic Railroad. If I could describe this movie in one word, it would be bizarre. And it's not just because of the usual suspects like the lack of chains and the focus on humans and the magic, although that of course is a big part of it, but it also felt structured very weirdly, like the scenes just happen like very strangely so that they can advance the plot, and the way it's done, I can't really describe it, but it's really weird. Another thing is that the chains, of course, don't affect the plot almost at all. That's, of course, obvious, we all know that. But I realized that even Diesel 10, the main antagonist, also doesn't affect the plot, like, at all, which also feels really strange, which makes you question why he's even in the movie at all. Same could be said for Splatter and Dodge, although they are really hilarious and I love them. Diesel 10 is, I mean, yeah, I get that one of the main points of him is that he is, like, less competent than he seems, but even then it feels, like, really strange. And also, I really don't like how he gets defeated several times, like when that shed falls on him, and then when he gets buried under all that coal, and he's just fine the next scene, because that implies that someone decided to rescue him, but who would do that? The chains, well, they all hate him. The humans, I mean, do they even exist? Well, they do, but the fact that we don't see any of them at all on Sodor is just really odd, and I don't understand why they couldn't have at least, like, put some human props in the background on some stations or something, because it's really weird without them. Sodor feels really toy-like in this movie, and I wonder if the lack of humans helps with that. Another thing I want to mention is the voices. They're more cartoony than I remembered, and I'm not sure if I still like them as much. P.T. Boomer, I think the movie works as well without him because he doesn't add anything to the plot either, and he feels a little bit generic, and also he represents everything wrong with Magic Railroad, that being the magic, lack of engines, and focus on humans. So the movie definitely wouldn't have been more successful with him. But on the other hand, the Bernard Stone plot loses something without him. Bernard Stone in this movie, yeah, he's fine, but I don't know. Something really odd about this is that people say that this isn't a Thomas movie, it's a Shining Time Station movie. And I get the logic, but when you think about it, it's not a Shining Time Station movie either. Because most of its human characters are OCs. Lily, Bernard Stone, the new Mr. Conductor, Junior, Patch, and also Matt. Those aren't characters from Shining Time Station, so this isn't really for Thomas fans, it's for Shining Time Station fans, I assume. So, who exactly is this movie for? It's really weird. And also, Shining Time is like really weird. It feels very strange, like how it's this magical place, and it's really odd. Even as a kid, I thought that the way it was portrayed was just super strange. Uh, Also, about the weird structure of this movie, one of the scenes I want to point out is Diesel 10's second scene. It's just really odd because he just arrives, and then his dialogue is basically, "Ah, I'm evil and this is my plan, you won't stop me," and then he leaves. Was there no better way to like explain his motivations or something? And the scene with him before that is even worse because after he shows up, Thomas just describes, yes, that is Diesel 10. He is the main antagonist of this movie. Again, was there no better way to tell us this? Yeah. Um, I think at the core of this movie is a story that is really good about this man who loses touch with magic and his childhood and this little girl who helps him regain it, but it doesn't feel like anything that belongs with Thomas, and that's one of the reasons why I think this is so bizarre, because watching this, it just doesn't feel like anything from Thomas the Tank Engine at all. There's of course the magic, but even there's other little things which just feel so weird, like the lack of humans and the lack of other solar engines. So yeah. And also about this movie's canonicity, I don't think it's a big problem with it being in canon because, yeah, I know that magic doesn't appear again after that, but that doesn't mean it can't exist. And there's also nothing saying that Sodor is an alternate dimension from real life. It just says that it's a different dimension from Shining Time. So for all we know, Shining Time Station is the different dimension from real life, and Sodor is real life. At least that's how I interpret it. I think it's fine this way. And how I would rank this movie, I would put it in C. I can't put anything from Brit Alcroft lower than this, although I do find it really bizarre how she made something like this. But I pretty much said that. So yeah, I would put it in C. It's fine and it has a lot of charm, but it's really not good. Yeah, and I almost can't believe that a few years ago I put it in my like number 3 or number 4 favorite movie. I really don't want to do that now. So yeah, Calling All Engines comes next. I gotta say, I enjoy this movie a lot more than I thought that I would. Now, a lot of this is probably due to nostalgia. I have lots of fond childhood memories of watching this movie on Christmas each year back when it was still pretty new. But even despite that, I'd say it's still pretty good. So, first of all, the overall atmosphere. I love the music, I love the sound design, I love the model work. This is probably, well, it's not the hit as best, that would be the great discovery, but it's still pretty good. There are many moments where I thought, oh wait, that's pretty nice model work, like when Thomas was rebuilding the solar suspension bridge. The music I enjoyed the entire time, and the sounds, like how they made the diesel sound and all that. I even as a kid I thought that they made it sound very well. Um, the story is pretty good. It's one of the Hitler's best, but that's mainly because it's a special, so more care gets put into it, and it has more chance to grow and shine. But again, it's still pretty good, like even on its own, like without being just a special. One thing that I like about this is how different and unique it is compared to the other specials. And by that I mean how, unlike most of the other specials, it has the usual Thomas intro and the engine encore at the end and the Welcome to Sodor sequence at the start. And also how it's mixed with the songs and the learning segments. Now, the learning segments, I know that most people don't like how they are in the movie, but I gotta say, I like them. Yeah, they were perhaps a bit unnecessary, but they're still pretty near. A nice remnant of a bygone era. And also, we didn't have the learning segments in the country where I lived. They were only in calling all engines. So later, when I joined the fandom, I was a little surprised that, oh my god, the learning segments from calling all engines are in other things too. But the songs, I didn't really like them. I don't mean that the songs themselves were bad. I mean that they were poorly integrated into the movie because sometimes the movie just kind of stops weirdly and then the song happens and then the movie continues and it's very unnatural. I don't like how it's done. Together was the only one that was well put into the movie, and that's because it's at the end where the song makes sense to be like made like this. But on their own, the songs are pretty good. Busy is my least favorite, but it's fine. Together is great, and Trying to Do Things Better is a banger. About the cast, a lot better than how the Magic Railroad had it because, well, there's more engines, there's of course the steam team, there's the main diesels, and then we have cameos like Lady and Dieselton, George, Daisy, Harvey, Derek, and those are all really nice and they help expand the Sodor. But I still think that it was not enough. We need more diesel engines, so Salty and Boko should have appeared, and a couple more steam engines wouldn't hurt, like maybe Murdoch or Arthur, I don't know. And I'm not saying that they should play major roles in the movie, but they should be present in crowd shots, like how Daisy was used or how Derek was used, because when it's just the steam team in the main row, it kind of feels like it's only the steam team that learns the lesson about working together, and the rest of the island doesn't. So, if like maybe sometimes randomly there would be Murdoch among the other engines, it would be different. But yeah, I like how the main cast was used and how most of the engines that they brought back were used for a specific purpose, like George, Daisy, Harvey, and of course Lady and Diesel 10. I really like how this movie used Lady. I'm not referring to how they only made her appear in a dream. I'm referring to how she is the one who suggests how to solve the conflict and how she tells it herself to Thomas. That's really nice, and if you see Lady as canon, then this is a really nice way to utilize her also. And of course, Diesel 10, he's great. I get why people don't like him here because he doesn't really act like Diesel 10. And even as a kid, I was disappointed that throughout the movie he has this aura and then he's just nice to Thomas, but whatever. It's still really nice to see him, so I don't care. And I think the only thing that I don't really like about this movie, like about the plot, well, it's just one scene. It's where Thomas convinces all the engines to help him, because he just tells them, guys, we gotta work together, and they're all like, yeah, he has a point, so they work together, and that's mostly it. If I was writing this movie, I would make it so that he would show them all of the things that were being destroyed as a result of their fighting, and the engines would think, wow, I didn't realize it was so bad. Maybe we should listen to Thomas. I think that would be a lot more natural and they would have more reason to trust him. Oh, and of course, Emily, I think she deserves a mention of how she fully joins the main cast here. That's great. Although I think it's really funny how they make another berth in the sheds for her, and it's like, yay, we can finally all sleep together. Meanwhile, Toby is exiled to Arsdale. It's really funny. Mavis was done nicely in this movie. Oh, it's interesting how this movie doesn't have a new character. If there was a new character, I think it would be a nice Diesel who would pretty much fill Mavis's role. But I'm really glad that they didn't make a new character because not every movie needs them, and this movie works well with Mavis in that role and without any other new characters. And I think that's everything. Yeah, that's probably it. As for where I would end this movie, I was expecting to put it in like C tier, but no, it has to go in B tier. So it's not perfect, it's not amazing, but it's still pretty good. B tier is not bad at all. So right now it's one tier above Magic Railroad. All right, let's go to the Great Discovery. I did not enjoy this movie as much as I thought I would. I really thought that I would enjoy Calling All Legends less and The Great Discovery more than I would, but it ended up being the opposite. Who knew? This movie starts off strong. I really like the beginning up until Thomas finds Great Waterton and it starts being restored. And after that, it just kinda loses like its quality, I guess. It just becomes a lot less interesting. It becomes about this drama about Thomas not feeling appreciated, and like I get that he's not meant to be really right in this context, like I guess, but it still feels really weird. His logic, like he sees Stanley having fun with Percy one day, and he decides to become a villain or something like. But it's I think it's still pretty nice development, and I do really like how after he really messes up and causes the tower to get destroyed, he takes some responsibility and tries to make it right. I really like that. I think that's how Thomas should be. Stanley, however, is even worse because most of the time he's just not really developed. He's just there. He's the exciting new engine, but he's not really that special. They make a big deal out of him when he's introduced, but he's like just an engine with an interesting color, sure, but I just see an engine. I don't see anything too special. But one thing I do really like is how Stanley is the first one to notice that Thomas was hurting the whole time and realizes that he was just like, I don't know, misguided, I guess. That's great. It shows that Stanley like isn't just some engine who likes having fun, but that he actually thinks about like the others. That's really good. Uh, the songs in this movie were better integrated into the movie than the ones in Calling All Engines. I'm not sure if they were better. I guess the ones that were better, and the ones and the other two were just whatever. I didn't really enjoy Thomas and James are Acing or Where is Thomas, they were just whatever. But I did really like Jobs Plenty and the other one, Thomas You're the Leader. Those were great. The cast was better because we could see more engines, but I didn't really like how usually there's still like the Steam team and then there's everyone else, and these two groups don't really interact, which is a problem because when something happens to the Steam team, it's positioned like it's something that happens to all the engines, but it's just the Steam team. But thankfully they do often show the other engines also like reacting to the things like when Thomas finds Great Waterton and then when Thomas is found, so that was better. It was definitely a lot better than in Calling All Engines, and it was of course great to see everyone back, especially the pack. This was the movie where they probably shined the most. Um, One thing that always confused me is how Thomas and James are racing to the wharf, and the winner gets a special prize, and the loser gets a less interesting prize. And then James loses, but he gets the better prize, which is working with the narrow gauge engines. And Thomas, the winner, has to work with Duncan, who everyone hates. And even as a kid, I thought that that was stupid. Everyone knows that everyone hates Duncan, so why give the task of working with him to the winner? It would have been better if Thomas lost and he had to work with Duncan, and yeah, I just think that would have been a lot better. And another thing I really like about this movie is how this movie shows us a lot of Sodor by not showing it us to us. What I mean by that is that it shows us that there are other places on Sodor with probably their own history and all that, but it doesn't directly show them to us. So, for example, it shows us the Rolling River Bridge and that there is a line which continues somewhere beyond that point, but it doesn't show us to where, it doesn't show us what is on that line, just that it exists and that it probably goes to somewhere. And this is a nice way to expand Sodor without like building extra sets and all that. And this is also the same with the Morgan's mine, because there is that other line where that track goes. We don't know what that part of the mine looks like. And there's that abandoned area where Stanley found Thomas that also must have led to somewhere, but we don't know to where. And one last thing, Pierce Brosnan's narration, I love it a lot. I think he said in an interview or somewhere that he tries to narrate it as if he was reading the story to his own child, and you can definitely tell that because it has this special energy of like being like, I don't know, warm, I guess, and it's just really good. And I wish that he could have narrated some more episodes or movies. But yeah, this this was probably, well, it wasn't my least favorite Model Thomas movie, but it definitely wasn't my favorite. And people say that this is the best one out of the three, but that doesn't really mean much when your competition is Calling All Engines and Magic Railroad. And even then, I think I enjoyed Calling All Engines more. So I think that I would put this movie on C tier, but above Magic Railroad. So yeah, that's probably everything. Now let's go to Hero of the Rails. A few years ago, when Hero of the Rails started getting more popular on Twitter and probably other places, I thought to myself, yeah, that makes sense. I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but it was pretty good, so I should give it a watch again and see if it holds up for me too. And so I went in expecting this movie to be really enjoyable, and I had to turn it off after the first 10 minutes because I just couldn't get past it. The things like the overuse of narration and the lack of logic overall just really bothered me. And sometime later, I decided to give it another chance, and this time I enjoyed it, but only because I was expecting to dislike it. So, this movie, for me at least, can only be enjoyed if I'm expecting the bare minimum, which isn't a good thing. And since then, of course, my opinion has changed. I was expecting this movie to be a bit better than I remembered, and it was that, so my opinion on it has gotten better. But even then, my initial first impression of it just hasn't gone away, and I doubt it will. And I wouldn't say it was entirely wrong, because this movie has a lot of problems, and I don't understand why it's considered as one of the best movies by the fandom. I think it's the most overrated thing in the entire fandom. It's okay, but it's absolutely not top tier. Anytime I see it above movies like The Great Race or Journey Beyond Soda, I just cringe a little because I just don't see it. So of course there's the problem with the overuse of narration, but I can excuse that because this was their first time using CGI. They didn't know how much of it they could remove, or probably even that they could remove it. And also it helps with making the CGI transition feel less sudden. So I won't really like blame this movie for that, but it does hurt it a little bit. There's also like the small logic issues, like how they constantly say that the engines can't pull more than like 4 flatbeds or something, which is ridiculous. But the biggest issue with the movie is its fundamentally flawed premise, and it's that Thomas fears that Sir Topham Hatt would scrap Hero. Not only his hero and engine, on an island where all engines are preserved, not only is he a steam engine on an island where steam engines especially are preserved, he is also the most historically significant engine on all of Sodor. And he thinks that the guy who is all about preserving steam engines would scrap him. That just doesn't make any sense, and there just isn't like a way to cut it, because by now Thomas should know it. Like, he knew that Sir Topham had rescued Oliver and that he preserved all of the engines and that he keeps them all in service even though they're outdated. So why would he think that Hero is too much? That just doesn't make any sense. And then there's also the issue, of course, with Hero not really making sense in the lore of Thomas. Now, of course, the TV series never really adopted railway series lore like Neil or the Sodor and Mainland Railway. So while Hero contradicts the railway series lore, it doesn't really contradict anything from the TV series. But even then, the railway series lore is still like a part of this franchise, and it's the default, so it shouldn't be contradicted just because. And I don't think there is really anything here that requires Hero specifically to be here, and not like, I don't know, Neil or something. So yeah, I'd rather they just use someone that made more sense. And I'm not really just referring to Neil, but also to the fact that Hero is a Japanese engine, because I just can't imagine a small 19th century British railway buying a massive Japanese engine from the other side of the world, as one of its first engines. This just doesn't make any sense. It could if they like gave it at least some explanation, but they just don't. So it's kind of hard to believe that the hero would even be on Sodor. So yeah, and when the main premise is flawed that that Thomas fears Topham Hackett could scrap someone, the whole movie is flawed, and there's just not really a lot I can do about it. That being said, there are of course things I enjoy about this movie. The voice cast was decent, it wasn't perfect, but it was alright. I especially enjoyed Spencer, and also Hero and Victor were great, but Spencer was my favorite. Then the characters, so Hero is great, definitely one of the CGI series' best characters. And Victor and Kevin are great too. I like that this movie doesn't really treat Victor as the head of Steamworks, just an engine who works there. That's an issue with the later seasons and the other appearances of Victor. And as for the other characters, Spencer's motivation is kind of odd, like he wants to hurt Thomas, but it just still feels like that. It doesn't feel like the right motivation, if that makes sense. The other characters, like the Steam team, there's really not much to say there. And also, I found it odd how Spencer was just forgiven after trying to murder a guy. So, yeah, that was my opinion on Hero of the Rails. I'm not sure where I should put it, because I didn't like hate it, but I didn't enjoy it a lot, and I'm not sure how I feel about putting it below Magic Railroad, and I might change my opinion later, but for now, I am putting Hero of the Rails in D tier. Sorry, Hero of the Rails fans. Alright, now let's go to everyone's favorite movie, Misty Island Rescue. Oh boy. I tried. I tried to give this movie a chance. When I started watching this, I thought to myself that, I haven't watched this movie in a long time, and I don't remember exactly what made me hate it so much. Maybe it's just that everyone else was too harsh on it and I took their word for it. Maybe everyone was just angry that it wasn't always really accurate enough or something, and maybe they were just overreacting. Maybe I am going to enjoy it, so I did try to watch this with a unbiased opinion, and the movie started decent enough, but then it just became worse and worse. Like at first I was like, okay, so maybe this could be C if it stays this decent. Then it didn't stay decent, so I thought that maybe D, and then I had to eventually push it to E, and now I just want to put it at F. This movie is full of plot contrivances, and if it was just one or two, it would be fine, because, well, no movie is perfect. Every movie has like a little thing that maybe someone didn't properly think through. But when a movie is full of them, when the movie is almost entirely constructed out of them, it's just lazy writing. There are some things that people are unfairly harsh on this movie. Mainly that I sometimes see people say that this movie treats Thomas as being in the right, and that the movie's moral is that you should act like Thomas. This couldn't be further from the truth. The movie makes it very clear that you shouldn't do what Thomas is doing. Thomas himself even later says that, yeah, I shouldn't have done what I did. If you want to dislike this movie, there are plenty of valid reasons. But then there are the many plot contrivances. The boat just so happens to have an unsafe raft, and then it just so happens to break and go to Misty Island, and it just so happens to go exactly to the place where Thomas can go away from the raft onto the island, and then Misty Island just so happens to have Joby Wood on it, and it also just so happens to have a tunnel, and the tunnel just so happens to collapse in the exact spot where Thomas can blow smoke from it, and it just so happens that the mist clears when Thomas does that. And I think that's not even everything. The movie has a really strange structure, because often in the middle where Thomas is preparing all the logs, the movie just cuts back to Sodor, and each of these scenes is short only like 20 seconds, and it just has Topham saying Thomas is still missing, and then Percy sighs, and then it cuts back to Misty Island. What is the point of these scenes? Are they really there just so that the kids are reminded that so are Mrs. Thomas? Is that it? Uh, this movie is, of course, super unrealistic, and being unrealistic in itself isn't automatically bad, but there needs to be a reason for it, and it can be super frequent. This is an era of Thomas that was super unrealistic, so of course this was going to reflect in the movie. But oh my god, this movie is unrealistic even for Nitrogen era standards, which is incredible. And just why they could have not done that. The unrealistic things this movie does, many of them aren't really there for any big purpose that couldn't be like at least changed a little bit, but sometimes it could even be removed. And they just ignore that. And uh, again, when it's full of things like this, it's just lazy, and it's not great. Bash Dash and Ferdinand, they aren't as bad as people say. The worst thing about them is that they are what represents Misty Island, but that's more of an issue with Misty Island and not them, so I can't really hate them that much, but at the same time, they just weren't that great despite that. They were annoying, and again, I tried to like be unbiased when I started watching it today. I thought that maybe they weren't that annoying, that people were overreacting, but no, I dislike them too. With being the one who knows the most about Misty Island is a incredibly baffling decision. Like, it makes sense for him to know about Misty Island, but it doesn't make sense for him to be the expert on it, the one who knows the most about it. Um, there are so many nonsensical things here, but the one I want to point out is the rescue, because why are they sending trains to the place where they don't even know if there are solid rails still there? Why not send an off-road vehicle or off-rail vehicle? That would make infinitely more sense. And yeah, when I previously said that this movie is super unrealistic, the better word would be illogical. Because again, unrealism itself isn't bad, but there needs to be at least some internal logic, and this movie just doesn't have that. Another strange thing is how everyone seems to know about Misty Island. Like, there's the first scene about Salty telling everyone about Misty Island, but then later on everyone just knows everything about it. Like, Percy knows that there is a tunnel even though we haven't seen him, like, seeing it before. He just randomly mentions it one time. Whiff knows about it, but I mentioned that. And yeah, there's just so much to dislike about this movie. I actually recorded an entire 15-minute rant about this, but it was just too long for this review, so I am doing it again and making it shorter. So before I turn this off, I just want to say the few things that I enjoyed. There's of course the obvious ones like I Can Never Find Another Thomas and the post-credit scene. But the thing that I probably enjoyed the most were first the scene where Cranky feels sorry for Percy and looks again. This is a really nice character moment for Cranky. Um, but that's about it about from this part of the movie, and other than that, I was surprisingly pleased by the Thomas chasing Diesel sequence, because it actually wasn't that bad, even though the narrator just couldn't shut up. So yeah, that was great. Oh, and one last thing, I've seen a couple people say that Thomas wasn't racist to Diesel, that he just told him that Diesel won't be a steamy. But that's not the main thing that Thomas said in that. First, Sir Topham had said that he is going to give a prize to the engine who is the most useful, and then Thomas says that he isn't going to choose a Diesel. How exactly is that not racist? Can someone explain it to me, please? So yeah, that's probably everything particular and noteworthy about this. Of course, I could go for on much longer, but I don't want to. This movie, I'm putting it at F tier, and it 100% deserves that spot. And the next movie is going to be Day of the Diesels. Hooray! I wasn't expecting this to be anything amazing. After Mr. Island SQ disappointed me so much, I knew that I shouldn't expect anything good, but I still remember that Day of the Diesels was a little bit better than Mr. Island SQ, and yet somehow I hated it much more. I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. So, Day of the Diesels has many issues, among them the fact that somehow all of the pieces for a cohesive and good story are there. They just use them in baffling ways, and overall it just doesn't work. And then, of course, there's the fundamentally flawed premise, which is that Percy feels sad because Thomas has a new friend. Not a new best friend, just a new friend in general. Which just doesn't make sense because obviously Thomas had other friends before and he has them after, so like what is different here? And also Percy is just way too out of character. Like I know that this is his character in this era, Thomas's friend and not much else, but this is just too much. And another strange thing is that throughout this movie, Percy and the narrator and everyone just basically says that Percy no longer has any friends. What about the Steam Team? Like, obviously, there's still the Steam Team. Why can't he still be friends with them? Because Thomas didn't do anything to him. He just didn't hear him one time, and that made Percy join the dark side for some reason. But the other engines, they hurt Percy even less than Thomas, who already hurt him like not at all. So, what did they forget his friends with the Steam Team or what? So yeah, so that's one of the reasons why this movie just shouldn't happen. But another is that Dieselton's plan just makes zero sense. For starters, what exactly does he need Percy for? To get Kevin? Why can't they get him themselves? Like, yeah, they don't want, for, I don't know, Kevin to get kidnapped, they want him to go willingly, but we've established that they can manipulate a guy to be friends with them. So why not skip the middleman and just manipulate Kevin into wanting to go to them? But of course, they don't need Kevin. So the only other possible thing that Percy could help them with is getting Victor to go away. But why do they need Victor to go away? Like, there's a dozen big, strong, mean diesel engines, and you tell me that they can't do anything if a tiny narrow gauge engine is in the same room with them. What? So they don't need Percy for that either. So the majority of this movie is spent on something that just doesn't even need to be there. And the only other possible thing that they could need him for is to get Sir Topham-Hatt's attention. But as the climax of this movie establishes, they don't actually want Sir Topham-Hatt's attention, because the moment he shows up, everything falls apart and they all start crying, and Sir Topham-Hatt is just too scary for them. Which is... that's another reason why this plan just doesn't work. It somehow requires Topham-Hatt not to notice or investigate a bunch of diesel engines trashing the steamworks, which is obviously not going to happen. So, what exactly was Dieselton trying to accomplish if he couldn't even handle like Topham-Hatt's mere presence, because he starts like being scared of Topham the moment he shows up before he even starts talking? Which also adds another layer of nonsense to his plan, because throughout most of this movie, Dieselton tries to get Percy to get Topham's attention. But if he doesn't want Topham's attention, what would he do if Percy succeeded? Like, that just doesn't seem very thought out. And of course, this movie has the standard nitrogen era problems, like the dialogue is terrible, Thomas wished and he whooshed and all that. The logic, of course, is not there. The climax is also strange, because there is, of course, the charge of the Steam Team. They all race to the steamworks so they can get them back. And then nothing happens because Topham-Hatt shows up. So there was 0 point to that scene aside from, oh wow, this looks cool. Uh, then Then there's the fact that this movie completely ignores the events of Calling All Engines. Like, even as a kid, I figured that, yeah, this is a kid's show, continuity isn't that important. But I always figured that at least a special would remember the events of previous specials, since the specials are kind of more important than the average episodes. But no, apparently no, the Steamies and Diesels hate each other, apparently, for some reason. And this time, Diesels are bad, and Thomas is in the right to not trust them, and what exactly were they thinking here? Like, I know that this isn't a direct analogy to racism, but in this era it was the simplest it has ever been, and I would argue that in this era they were definitely trying to do that. So what exactly did they think when they made this? Uh, um, And it also feels like kind of anticlimactic, the whole climax, because this movie is building up towards the resolution of Dieselton's grand plan, and everyone watching this was so hyped up for a true Dieselton to return after what he was in Calling All Engines. God, remember the hype of this movie before it came out? I do. So then finally the Diesels invade Steamworks, and then Diesel then just spins on a turntable and the others goof around, and that's it. And it's just very, like, why? Why does it have to be this? Couldn't it be something a little bit more special? Because that seems to be like what everyone wanted and what they were going for, I guess. And of course, yeah, there's the fact that Diesel 10 is very different to how he was in Calling All Engines. For some reason, that's okay. I can forgive that, but even then, it feels wrong to just retcon the first regular special like this, because this just feels like a retcon. This is just too much to be. Whatever, that's not important. So anything I enjoyed, I did like that they gave a few scenes where Diesel 10's true personality like slipped through, which made it clear that his manipulative persona is more of a mask, which is nice, but it doesn't really go anywhere because the only time his, like, I don't know, true personality shows up is at the climax, where again he just spins on a turntable and that's it. So that was kind of pointless. I did like how he is obsessed with Thomas. That feels very much like a callback to Magic Railroad, and I always appreciated that. And I also like how the new Diesels in this movie weren't new in universe, that they already were on this island. It made it feel like they were hidden from the spotlight. In other words, that they were stuck doing the less important jobs, which definitely helps what this movie seems like it was trying to do, but at the same time, this movie doesn't feel like it was trying to do that. It's very strange. And if this movie was actually going for the Diesels are underappreciated angle, then Thomas's role in this is really good because he feels kind of like a upper class celebrity disconnected from the problems of the less, I don't know, not less useful, less appreciated engines. And but that's not really what they were going for, because Thomas is proven to be in the right. So yeah, it's just so weird. I'm glad that this is behind me, and to move on to Blue Mountain Mystery. Before that, oh yeah, Flynn and Bell, whatever, I don't care. I think that's everything. F below Mr. Island Rescue. Next! A couple years ago, when the Unlucky Duck first said that he considers Blue Mountain Mystery to be one of the two best movies, I thought to myself that that it was really strange, because I mean it's a Nitrogen era movie. How could it be on the same level as Soda's Legend of the Lost Treasure? So I rewatched it and expected to hate it, and I ended up 100% agreeing with the Unlucky Duck because it was just that good. Then sometime later, I forgot really why exactly I liked it so much, so I watched it again, and again I thought that I would dislike it, and once again I loved it a lot. So when I watched this movie again, I was mostly expecting to enjoy it a lot, but I was also expecting the typical night agenisms like, I don't know, Thomas wished and he wished and all that to be really annoying at this point because I just watched three of the previous movies back to back. And surprisingly, I still enjoyed it a lot. I would put it at like 80, so it's not excellent. It is excellent. It's not the best, but it's definitely very close. So the first thing that I've noticed is that the things that really hurt the overall presentation of the previous movies, like the bizarre dialogue and odd logic and the narrator talking too much, most of those things were completely gone, and it's incredible how much this helps this movie be good. If those things were here, it would be a lot worse. But of course, this movie is a lot better than just it doesn't have certain bad things. It's really good, like in other aspects, of course. Like how they gave Victor a backstory, of course. Luke is a fun character, although he doesn't really get developed past this movie, and I'm not sure if it's this movie's fault because it is his introduction. The narrow gauge engines, of course, it was great to see them back, but they didn't really do much, I think. Only Scarroy and Aeneas did anything, and the rest of them were just kind of there, which is alright, but I wish that they could have done a bit more. Uh, and one thing that I've realized is that I won't say that Luke is the main newbie of this movie. I'd say that Paxton is. Yeah, I know he's from Day of the Diesels, but this is where he gets properly introduced, and he's amazing. He's an excellent character, although I think that he's pretty much what Splatter and Dodge could have been if they were brought back, so yeah, but what Paxton is still very nice. And I also really liked how Diesel comes into the story pretty late. I thought that was pretty unique, and it also helps that the previous two movies had him in supporting villainous roles, and he is the main bad guy, which was great. The music was excellent. I love Luke's theme. It's one of my favorite from the entire franchise. And yeah, this movie is just really well put together. I like that, for example, instead of making another new character who would fill Victor's role, they instead developed an existing character more. That was really good. One thing that I really did not like is how it's not explained how Luke was able to stay hidden. Like, how did the thing controller not realize that he has an entire another engine on his railway? Like, I get that you have to suspend your disbelief sometimes, but this movie requires you to drop kick it into a bottomless pit. So, yeah, if they at least gave an explanation for how that happened, it would be different, but it wouldn't even need to be like a good explanation. It would need to be at least something. But this movie just doesn't give you anything in that regard. But that's still a pretty minor thing compared to everything else. And yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say. It definitely deserves a solid A. Oh, and the climax. I've seen people sometimes say that the narrow gauge engines were in the wrong for not listening to Thomas when Diesel showed up and all that. But you need to look at this situation from their point of view. They had just found out that a guy they trusted with an extremely important piece of information talked to it, talked about it to someone else, and then the biggest bad guy on the entire island shows up and immediately makes it known that he knows about the extremely secret thing and that he intends to ruin everything. So, they don't have the time to listen to Thomas explain. They need to quickly protect Luke. And if anything, the one to be blamed for this situation escalating is Thomas because he could have just shouted, "The Yellow Virgin is alive!" and then everything would be solved. And I'm not saying that he is like stupid or in the wrong for not doing that because he was also like panicking, he didn't really have time to think properly what he was saying. I'm just saying that it's definitely not the narrow gauge engine's fault for what happened, and Thomas's fault it's not either. And yeah, and I think that's everything. Yeah, that's it. Now let's go to King of the Railway. If I had to describe this movie in one word, it would be mid. Now remember, mid doesn't mean bad, it doesn't mean terrible, it just means somewhere in the middle between good and bad. Because this movie isn't anything too amazing, but it's not bad either, it's very nice to watch. I understand why some people don't like it because for a pretty big amount of it, it can be pretty much nothing. But to me, it's enjoyable, and really, that's all that matters. So this movie is probably the one that's most about just an average day on Sodor. Now, obviously, there's the construction of the castle, but it still is a lot about like the engines mostly like acting like they would normally act, and I'm glad that there's a movie that's like this. Obviously, I wouldn't like it if every movie in the Thomas series was like this, but it's nice to have one. So yeah, the concepts introduced in this movie are overall pretty great. Obviously, I'm not referring to Connor, Caitlin, and Millie because they don't get much development, although Millie is pretty good, I think. But mainly Steven and Sir Robert Norrumby, they are great, and it's a shame that they disappeared after a few years. It's actually kind of funny how the thing from this movie that is the most relevant today is Vickerstown Bridge. It's still in all engines go, which which is pretty cool. But yeah, Sir Robert is great, and the first few scenes with him are really funny. How he departs from Napford suddenly, and then how he summons Millie. He's a great character, and he and also Ulstead Castle are great examples of how you should use Thomas lore in a story. You should like check the lore to see if there's anything that could be useful for whatever you're planning. In this case, a castle and a nobility, but also reinvent them to make them more interesting and suited to whatever you're planning. This movie did that perfectly, and yeah, I just love it. There is the Gordon and Spencer support, and I understand why some people don't like it because it doesn't really affect anything. But I like it because it shows us how other engines beyond the main cast reacts to the events of the movie. In this case, it motivates them to race a lot, and then when Connor and Caitlin show up, they suddenly happen to lose all desire to race because what's the point? That was pretty funny too. So I wish that more Thomas movies had B plots like this. The Great Race has with Diesel, and I'll talk about that later. Another thing I really like about this movie is the trio of Thomas, James, and Percy. Despite them being a pretty big deal in marketing, they weren't actually really a trio in the show before this. So I like that we got to see them together like this. And I'll also say this about Tale of the Brave. Although I have to say I wasn't a big fan of James because a lot of the times he was just complaining about his paintwork and it got old pretty easily. But I did like how he does have moments of having a good heart or good nature or whatever you want to call it, because he really cares about finding Steven when he's lost. So I did enjoy that aspect of him. The songs in this movie, unfortunately, were pretty mid. Yeah, the best one was the one that was used from Blue Mountain Mysteries, and that says about everything. Um, but I think that what I enjoy the most about this movie is how it feels like a new start, a beginning to something new and exciting, which is, of course, the banner era. I'm not really sure if that's intentional or if it's just me thinking about it, but that's how I saw the movie even before I knew what exactly the banner era was, or that there was a difference in leadership and all that. So yeah, there probably is something about it that makes it seem like this. And I think that's about everything. So yeah, it's mid, which means I would put it at about C, below The Great Discovery and above Magic Railroad. Now let's go to oh wait. Jack's role in this was pretty cool, and I think that's about it. Yeah, he's not amazing, but it was nice to see him. And actually, I just realized that Vickerstown Bridges' role in this movie perfectly summarizes this whole movie. It doesn't actually do anything, and it's not really anything too special, but let's be real, without it, the world wouldn't be as great. Okay, now we can go to Tale of the Brave. At the time of me recording this, Tale of the Brave is being discussed on Twitter and has been for a couple of days. So some of the things I'm going to say are in response to the things people have said about it recently. So this movie is pretty divisive. It almost feels like there can be no in between. Either you really love it or you really hate it. And it's probably because there is a big difference of quality between the climax and the rest of the movie. The majority of this movie is pretty boring, which means it's forgettable, which means that when the epic climax shows up, people are only going to remember that and leave thinking that this movie is overall really good, which I don't think it is, but the climax really saves it because it is just that good, and for that reason I do put this movie as one of the better ones, definitely better than most of the movies I've reviewed now. So yeah, this movie features the return of the trio of Thomas, Percy, and James, which I like. I think they work nicely together. And I also think that the characters are handled pretty well. So there is of course Percy, he's a scaredy engine like usual in this era, but I do like how they make it clear that he's only this scaredy in this movie because of monsters being discussed and this putting ideas in his head. Yeah, it's still out of character for him, but at least they tried to like make it clear he's not always like this, so that's nice. Yeah, I know the rest of the show also has him as a scaredy engine, but the TV show isn't really that consistent, so I don't expect it to be. And James, people often say that he's really mean in this movie, and after rewatching, I have to disagree because I mean, most of the things he does in this movie, it's just teasing Percy, which isn't really all that out of character for James or all that extra mean compared to what he's usually doing. So, yeah, I don't think he's that terrible in this movie. The worst thing he does is make that scrap monster, but that's really just one thing, so I can't really get mad at him for being too mean, I guess. And I do like the development that both he and Percy have. Yeah, I know the show then ignores it, but that happens too every time the show makes character development, so you can't get mad at Tale of the Brave for season 18 early for that. Then the new characters, I feel like they are starting to get more blatantly created for merchandise. But I won't say that this movie's newbies are bad. I think they are all really good, or at least good. Gator is the only one who's important to the plot, and I like that he leaves. So after that, it's definitely the right decision. He works better as an absent character. If only he hadn't returned, but that's another discussion. Marion is awesome. She's really good, and this movie's biggest sin is that it doesn't feature her enough. And Timothy and Edge are kind of the similar thing. They're not really all that big or all that amazing, and the show definitely doesn't suffer from their disappearance. But I think they're neat. They have some decent characters, especially Edge. And Timothy, I just vibe with. So, yeah, I do like the newbies here. And Bill and Ben, This is probably the best they've been handled in CGI. They've got that mischievous side to them, but also some redeeming qualities. And I also want to highlight how Timothy is less of the underling who they bully and more the equal who they tease, because when they play that prank on him at the start, he laughs it off, which is how it should be, because otherwise Bill and Ben's tricks just feel too mean. Um, so yeah, most of this movie is forgettable, so there's not really much to talk there. But the climax is great. So first there's the cranky scene, and it's awesome. Like, that's undeniable. Anyone else thought as a kid that Cranky was genuinely going to fall into the ocean? I've seen some people say that it's pointless because it doesn't affect anything because Percy is not on the ship. I disagree because it stops Thomas from reaching the clay pits in time, and without him, the conflict between Percy and James gets worse. Oh yeah, that's another thing. I do like how James does try to apologize to Percy. People say that he's being forced to do that by Thomas, but Thomas can't exactly force James to do it. So James definitely had some sort of control over his actions when he was going to apologize. And he does seem to be a little remorseful, but of course Percy doesn't let him speak, and that puts James into defense mode. And I think that's a great way to create conflict. And by the way, I'm not saying that the conflict is Percy's fault because he had every right to get mad at James. But James, to his credit, did at least try, and at the end he of course learns his lesson. So yeah, great development, I think, and then the climax of the clay pits, the tension before it starts, and then when the landslide begins, it's just great. Same as the cranky scene. I'm not sure what else is there to talk about. I didn't mind the song in the credits, and I think that might be everything. Oh yeah, probably one last thing, the structure. This movie has a very interesting structure. It makes you think at first that it's a Thomas movie, but then the focus shifts to Percy, and before you realize this is a Percy movie. And the same thing with James. He initially just has a line every few scenes, and then suddenly he becomes one of the main characters, and I think that's really fascinating. I think the movie did that really well. But yeah, Tale of the Brave, I would put it at like B tier above Calling All Engines, so not one of the best and still pretty good. Okay, now let's go to The Adventure Begins. Can't wait. What can I say? It's perfect. It's amazing. If this was just I don't know, a lazy reanimation of all the scenes from the original shot for shot, then yeah, it would still be interesting, but it wouldn't be that amazing. But this movie is great for all of the new and unique things that it does and that it adds to the series and to the lore. And they really help this story a lot. I'm not saying that the previous version of the story in the book and in season 1 didn't work. It did. But this one is great because it's unique and it just does very interesting things, like how it establishes certain things earlier, like Annie and Clarabelle or Judy and Jerome, how it adds several new things like Glyn or Judy and Jerome, and the some subplots like the one with Henry and the chase with James and all that, and all those tiny extra scenes, which just help tie the whole thing together, and it works really well. This is definitely a movie where you can tell that there is a lot of heart and soul in it, and I just couldn't stop smiling throughout watching it because it was just that good. The soundtrack helped a lot because hearing classic songs redone for a new movie in a new style, it was also great, and of course them being brought back. But the one out of all the songs and music themes I would like to highlight is the Runaway theme, because that was probably one of the original is one of the most iconic ones, so of course hearing it here is great. But the way it's structured here is just amazing. The whole chase is great too, because you really don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. Obviously, you know that in the original James crashes, but this isn't the original. This is a new version where instead of James passing by Thomas, Thomas chases James. So you really don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, if James is going to crash or not. So it definitely keeps you in suspense. And yeah, the cast is great. I like how much of a group they are here, except for Henry. And here's where I get into the biggest problem with this movie. Usually, when people talk about this movie and Henry Sewell in it, they mention how he's out of character, how he shouldn't be in his new CGI series persona. But honestly, I think that's not the big issue here because compared to the elephant in the room, it's really small. The big issue with Henry is that he's completely separated from everyone else. Like Thomas, Edward, Gordon, and James, they interact with each other throughout the entire movie. But Henry, he's just separate from everyone. There is not a single scene where Henry talks to Edward, to James, to Gordon, or even to the Fat Controller. He just talks to Thomas. And that just isn't right because this movie is about the roots of the franchise and about celebrating them. And those roots began with a book about engines who worked on a railway, and there was three of them. And I mean the three railway engines, of course. Henry was one of the three railway engines, and there is a group of three engines in this movie who are HAO. But the third engine is James for some reason. Why? Like, that just seems like such a massive oversight that it shouldn't have even happened. And yeah, seriously, Henry only interacts with Thomas. I guess you could make the argument that he kind of interacts with the flashback, but we don't even really see it. We just have it explained to us by Edward. So yeah, they definitely could have handled Henry a lot better by letting him interact with the other engines more. If I were to rewrite this movie, I would basically swap Henry and James's roles. Now, obviously, Henry would still have the role of not being able to pull his chain, and James would have his role of having faulty brakes and of becoming a runway. But I would swap the part where James is the one who teases Thomas alongside Gordon and who is sometimes belittled by Gordon and who talks to Edward and Gordon like James does. And James would be the outsider who doesn't quite fit in, which would make sense because he is the new engine right after Thomas, so he doesn't fit quite in just yet. So this would make a lot of sense, and it's a shame that they didn't do it. I guess maybe a part of that is because James is just a more important character than Henry, or at least was at the time, and well, still is. But even then, it's just really disappointing. But I'm still glad with what they did with Henry. I'm referring to the scene where Thomas helps him overcome that fear of rain. It's a really great scene. And yeah, I'm not really sure what else I need to say about this movie that I haven't said before. Yeah, I think that's everything. S tier, it undoubtedly deserves that spot. And now let's go to Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. Can't wait. What can I say that hasn't been said before by other people? Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure is amazing. I expected to put it at the top of my list, but I think that I would probably put it a bit lower, like just one spot lower, that's it. But even still, I do have to admit that there were some things that disappointed me a little, and it's that the first half of the movie feels a little bit weirdly structured, like there's a lot of scenes which feel like they are kind of random, and they aren't because they lead, of course, to other things like Marion finding the treasure and similar things. So they are not pointless, but they do feel like it, at least at the start. Certainly, if you don't know what's going to happen, which I, of course, knew because I've watched it before, but still. So that's one of the things that feels a little bit bad, and similarly, Skiff and Sailor John, the main bad guy, are introduced like halfway into the movie, which feels a bit late. Well, they're not introduced that late, but we are told who they are that late, and it's also when they meet Thomas. So that also feels like it could have maybe happened a little bit earlier, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, this movie is amazing in a lot of ways. So Skiff is a fun character, Sailor John is a great villain. Ryan, he's alright, like there's not a lot we can say about him, but great movie, I can excuse it. Rex, Mike, and Bert, they don't do much in this movie, but it's just so amazing to see them that, like, you can't complain about this. And similarly, the cameos from Donald Douglas, Oliver, Toad, Duck, Daisy, Jack, Alfie, Max, Monty, and Oliver, the excavator, those are all also amazing. Many of them don't really do much in the movie, but, well, it makes sense for them to be there, and even if it didn't, it's just so nice to see them. It makes a lot more sense for them to be here than, I don't know, the Steam Team like in the previous movie. So I'm glad that they actually thought about it, and yeah, it probably is a little bit more than just a coincidence that it just so happened that they are fan favorites, but come on, it's great. Marion was amazing in this movie. This is where she truly shines. In Tale of the Brave, she didn't really have that much to do. Um, it was nice to see not the entire pack, but a bigger part of it together again. And I like how Max and Monte don't actually speak or do anything, but they are just in the background to help the pack feel more expanded, I guess. That's definitely how certain characters should be used in some movies. Um, Other than that, I'm not really sure what else to say. The soundtrack is amazing. About a year ago, I was listening to a playlist of several soundtracks of the Banner era movies, and it's incredible how much you could actually tell the difference when the Soda's Legend of the Lost Treasure soundtrack started playing, because it was just so much advanced compared to everything else. And the reason for that is probably that, unlike all of the previous soundtracks and the ones after it, this one was played with a live orchestra, an orchestra from Prague, which is great because I live in Prague, so I am happy about that. But yeah, this movie has an amazing soundtrack which helps make this movie feel that much more special. The animation is also amazing. Like the lightning maybe it's beautiful. There's so many beautiful scenes in this movie. And then the chase, it's definitely one of the best chases in the entire franchise. It's just so intense, and the fact that it ends with Thomas not being able to save the treasure is also pretty good. Like, yeah, the treasure is rescued later on anyway, but it not in the chase, so it's just really good. I'm not sure what else I can say. Oh, Thomas and Sir Topham had personalities. So I hope that we can all agree that Sir Topham Hatt's personality is okay in this movie, because Thomas is acting really badly in this movie, so of course Sir Topham Hatt has to be that much sterner with him. And as for Thomas, well, I don't think this is really that out of character to his true personality. Yeah, I know he kind of lost that personality over the years, but it's still what he is supposed to be, so yeah, I can't blame this movie for attempting to stick back to it. And yeah, and then also Thomas was definitely in the wrong in all three accidents, because come on, he was just acting carelessly. The haters of this movie are so wild because they have to like ignore the movie and ignore a basic logic to defend Thomas. But that's a little bit of topic because I'm just sharing my thoughts on it, not defending it from other people. So probably said everything that I need to, and I would put it at S tier, just below The Adventure Begins. Now let's go to The Great Ace, which I will definitely enjoy. So, at first, I like this movie a lot less than I thought than I would, for the same reason why most of the other people in the fandom dislike this movie. And it got a lot better later on, but even in the first half, there was one thing that just saved it, and That is that it was just so goddamn funny. Like, I was just laughing the entire way through. There are so many good bits in this movie, from background gags like how Diesel chases past the steamworks, and then later a similar thing with Philip and Vinny, to character interactions like pretty much everything with Gordon and Flying Scotsman. I'm called the shooting star now. Don't be ridiculous. Like, that's just so good. Two other jokes, like, this movie is full of them and it saves it. It makes it so good. And it's not just the jokes, there are other great things. The soundtrack is amazing, the songs are amazing. Not sure if some of the franchise is best, but this is definitely the movie with the best songs, and I wish that this movie was like a Broadway musical or something similar to Starlight Express, because I think it would work really well like something like that. Um, so yeah, when it's at the Great Railway Show, it's really good also without the jokes, but before that, yeah, the plot is weak, but if a movie is entertaining, then I think that matters more than if the plot is good or not. And similarly, if the movie is really tedious to sit through, then it doesn't matter if the plot is good. Looking at you, Hero of the Rails and The Great Discovery. Um, yeah, so what else? Oh, yes, the Diesel subplot. People dislike the Diesel subplot, and I just can't understand it. I'm not going to go into many details because I don't have a lot of time, but it does affect the movie. It doesn't take much time away from the railway show, and it's just so funny. Like how when Thomas is at the shunting yard and he's preparing to take Diesel's train, and he whistles, and the Diesels think, wait, Diesel's whistle, but Diesel doesn't have a whistle. Oh well, and then they just start anyway, and it causes the crash. And then later on, when Diesel gets stuck in that crate, and then at the end of the movie, where they go back to this subplot, they show the Diesels looking through the docks, and then they just see him leaving Sodor. This movie is great in like but almost everywhere, but this scene at the end is probably a top contender for the best scene in the movie. And after that, I genuinely had to clap because it was just so good, the scene and the movie. Um, and also the vocal performances were also great. There are too many things to highlight, but there is one that I really want to, and it's when Thomas is avoiding the engines on the mainland, and when he sees Sydney, he just shouts, "Sydney!" And the amazing performance. Uh, I'm not sure what much else to say. Oh, I do like how this movie had the restraint not to like permanently introduce any of its characters into the series, like have Ashama permanently move to Sod or anything. I know that later a big work, big adventures happened and many became regular cast members, but that was unplanned, so this movie definitely had a restraint in that regard, and I appreciate it for that. And Gordon becoming shooting star is this is definitely one of the best things that has been done with Gordon in the show. And honestly, I don't really mind that he wasn't the main character. I think that the movie works decently as a Thomas movie, although the first half of it should probably get a little bit rewritten. And I think Philip was great in the movie. Yara too mean to him. I think that may be everything. Yeah, it is. So I'm not really sure how to end this movie. I'm still internally laughing from all of the great jokes in it, and I really want to put it at the top of S tier, which sounds a little insane, but it's just so funny. And I don't want to put it like below S tier. So yeah, for now I am going to put it I'm going to put it at the bottom of S tier, which means below Adventure Begins and Lost Treasure. So it's still really good. Not sure if it should be above Blue Mountain Mystery, but I want it to be in S tier. So yeah, The Great Race, S tier, and now let's go to Journey Beyond Sodor. This movie was a lot less enjoyable than I remembered. Story wise, I think it's good in that regard, it doesn't really do many bad things. But as for just being fun to watch, yeah, it doesn't really succeed as well. Let's start maybe at the beginning in the most annoying parts of this movie, James and his dynamic with Thomas. Usually, when people talk about Banner Era James and how terrible he was, they point at Tale of the Brave as the worst example of this phenomenon. But no, Journey Beyond Soda is where James was the worst, at least so far. He was just so annoying, and even worse is his dynamic with Thomas, which is just James winning and boasting about winning and being annoying, and Thomas being like, "No, I want to win. I want to be the favorite," and it's so bad, and it's really not fun at all. Uh, Another thing regarding the Soda part that I don't really like is how Sir Topham Hatt just doesn't seem to treat Thomas's disappearance seriously. And when James leaves, we don't even see him react to it in any way. Um, so yeah. Then Beresford, I actually like Beresford, and I don't think he's completely pointless. I think he's a great mirror to Thomas because they are kind of the same character. Think of it like this: Thomas is a guy who feels trapped in the place where he lives, and so to fulfill his dream of seeing what it's like beyond out there, he stops someone else from fulfilling that same dream. And then he meets this crane who feels trapped in the place where he lives, and so to fulfill his dream of knowing what it's like out there beyond, he stops someone else from fulfilling that same dream. They are the same character, and it's a great I don't know, contrast, but comparison, and I wish they did more with it because they just don't. Like, this would be a great place for Thomas to realize that, wow, maybe I was also acting badly and it wasn't just James or something like that. But no, he just tells Beresford to be nice, and that's kind of it. He also promises him that he's going to return and tell him stories, and then he doesn't do that for some reason. That's such a baffling decision. Hurricane and Frankie are the best newbies of this movie and the most important ones. I heard somewhere that they are like decent depictions of manipulative people. And if that's true, then congrats. They definitely feel like that, I guess. I like them a lot and how they are handled. And I also don't think it was a bad idea to have the experimental engines join the Steelworks crew. Because if Frankie and Hurricane were only doing what they were doing because of the circumstances they were in, then the best thing to do would, of course, be to fix the circumstances. I think that's like a great lesson for kids to learn and everything. But they still should have gotten punished because they were slave owners. Like, oh my god, did they. Never mind. Uh, Marilyn is often treated as like the best newbie of this movie. I get why, I don't really disagree much. But I think that Theo and Lexi get kind of overlooked because I think they are great too. And they get more attention than Marilyn, so like. I don't know, like Marilyn still has probably the most creative gimmick, but personality wise, I think that Theo and Lexi are maybe even on the same level as him. The Troublesome Trucks were great, and so were the Bridlington Diesels. The animation, like, of course, there's the unfinished animation, but that's not this movie's fault, so we shouldn't really, like, hold it against it, and it's also not that common in this movie. As for the bouncing, like, yeah, it's unfortunate, but after watching Boba and AG for years, I've just gotten used to it. I haven't even really noticed it. And the music and the songs, it was great, especially like the instrumental. It was really ambitious, really orchestral, really cinematic. But as for the songs themselves, they feel kind of childish, like the lyrics. So I'm not sure if I would like put them, I don't know, above the Great Aces songs, probably not. But the music, the actual instruments, those are really great. So I'd say that the music is still pretty good. And if that's everything, Oh wait, this movie is probably the start of early cartoony physics getting into Thomas. So yeah, that's another thing against it. But yeah, I think that's everything mostly. So I would rank this movie in C tier, and I would put it behind The Great Discovery and above King of the Airway. Overall, it's kind of mid, but the ambitions and the music and the characters mostly, and even the plot, like, I think they save it, and it's a decent movie. Definitely not among the franchise's worsts, and but not like a top 5 movie either. So yeah, mid. And now let's go to Big World, Big Adventures. Yippee! So, this movie was surprisingly more enjoyable than I thought it would be. Good? Not so much, but more enjoyable, I guess. It started good with the Thomas, Nia, and Ace dynamic. Nia and Ace work great as the angel and devil on Thomas's shoulders. But other than that, like, there were some great things, but there are also so many baffling decisions. Like how Thomas is written. He just is a super generic kid show protagonist, and it's really hard to watch because he just loses like all of his personality at times. Especially when he's around Ace, he's just, wow, that's so cool. I like doing cool things. Um, but Nia was great. She has lots of personality in this. It's really, I can't stress enough just how much full of personality she is. And Ace was great too. People don't like Ace. I sort of get it, like he is a guy who goes against the rules of the Thomas universe. But I think that's the point. I have a theory that Ace was written by Brenner to symbolize Mattel because, like, everything Ace does is like everything the Thomas universe should be, and he wants to corrupt Thomas basically and turn him into something he's not. And Thomas's arc in this movie is realizing that no, he shouldn't be doing that. He should be a railway engine. And yeah, and I think like that's kind of obvious. Like even at the start, Ace almost runs over a little bit OJ. And I just can't imagine any other reason why they would do this other than try to like symbolize that this guy is the guy who tries to run over OJ's legacy, like if you get what I mean. But maybe I'm just looking too much into it. But even without it, I think Ace was a fun character, and it makes sense for him to be like that because he is a racing car. He doesn't have the responsibilities Thomas has. And something interesting I noticed is that when Thomas finally abandons him, Ace actually seems to be a little bit disappointed. Like he actually grew to like Thomas, which would be great, except it doesn't go anywhere. And that also brings me to the post, not to the post credit scene, to the ending scene where he meets Topham, which also goes nowhere. Like, why did they even put that there? Because they had to know that the seasons wouldn't do anything like that, because they also made the seasons at the same time, so never mind. But if you ignore that it doesn't get followed up on in anything after it, the ending scene is hilarious, and I just love it. But Thomas and Nia's friendship, it's interesting. Nia is acting a little strangely because she must have noticed that Thomas doesn't want her help. So it's a little bit strange that later she gets angry at him when, like, he made it known to her day one. But I guess that in the meantime, he actually grew to like her, so maybe that's why she felt betrayed. Well, I think that's okay. This movie has moments where you can really tell what they were trying to do. Like that scene during the song Sometimes You Make a Friend, where Thomas is all alone on that ship. It really like gives you this feeling of him being totally alone and not really knowing what to do, where to go. So yeah, that scene had great vibes, and there are a lot of those similar moments of like adventure or something. Uh, the tracks, they were great in this movie. Both the Brazilian and African tracks. Um, what else is there? Oh, another strange thing is how after Ace completely betrays Thomas, Thomas later still wants to be friends with him anyway. That's just really strange. And it's also weird that Nia doesn't really like call him out on it. Like she tells him, maybe this guy isn't too much good, but she never really like blatantly tells him, Thomas, you shouldn't be with this guy, or anything like that. But yeah, that part definitely could have used some more work. And also, while I think it's a decent idea for Thomas to be swayed by this cool guy, they really should have written him to be like a little bit more, I don't know how to say, well, more like a railway engine who's always wants to be a railway engine in his DNA no matter what. I think it would be interesting if Thomas like wanted to go around the world with Ace, but his idea of being free and easy around the world is still involves pulling chains and being really useful. And he would be like surprised if Ace suggested him to not do that and just run around, because he would be like, but why? I have to do this. It's just who I am. And that could maybe lead into that bigger conflict. Like, so that Thomas would still like do the thing that drives the conflict of the movie, but still like not betray completely his engineness like he seems to want to do. So yeah, uh, but yeah, this movie it just I don't know, it's hard to watch often, and yeah, well, not hard to watch. It was fun, but there was just so much they could have and should have done differently. So how I would rank it? I think that I would put it in D tier, but I'm not sure if below or above Hero of the Rails. Right now I have it above, but it's close, so I might change it later. But unless that's everything, yeah, I think that's everything. So now let's go to the next movie, which is, oh dear God, Digs and Discoveries. Please save me. Digs and Discoveries. What even is Digs and Discoveries? It's not a movie because it occupies the slot of several episodes, and it's split into several parts, like a long episode. But at the same time, it's clearly meant to be this year's equivalent of the movie, but it's not really like structured like a movie, I guess. It really does feel like a blobber episode. It even has the episode intro, so like yeah, it's really weird to even talk about it because of this reason, but don't worry, the rest of this movie is just as stupid as this thing that I just talked about. So let's start with the characters. Thomas is so annoying and so stupid in this. They keep dumbing him down more and more with each year. He's just generic baby show protagonist who loves being cool and loves doing cool things, and he likes exciting. Yeah. Thomas says awesome in this movie. Engines shouldn't really say awesome, that feels very wrong. Gina is the only sane person in this, which is fine, but it doesn't really leave her with a lot to like do, I guess, or she doesn't get a lot of opportunity to like show her personality, I guess, or maybe she doesn't, she just doesn't. Whatever. Esther, I keep forgetting she even exists. The pack, like it's cool that they are here, but they do literally nothing. Like seriously, Max and Monty, they switch Thomas onto a different line, but Thomas could have just, I don't know, accidentally went there on his own. Then the pack like teases Thomas one time, and that's everything. Also, Brenda is with them, the fun new character who does even less than the other guys in this, which is a spectacular feat. Darcy isn't here, even though she is one of the two new members of the pack this season. No, seriously, why did they not bring her here? Like, it's not like they thought that she wouldn't have any role here, because none of the pack do. But whatever. Lorenzo and Beppe, they are fun, but they're also such obvious stereotypes that it doesn't really matter. Like, if you ignore that they are fun, but then you also have the fact that in another episode, Lorenzo seems to be like abusing Beppe. So yeah. And then we have Stefano. Oh my dear Stefano. I love him. I'm a little bit biased because, well, I have my own personal reasons to love him, and it kind of went too far because now I just start smiling every time I even think about him. So, of course, I enjoyed almost every scene that he appeared in. But at the same time, like, what even is he? Could they not make it, like, less obvious that he is just a toy? Yeah, but I wanna say that people are too harsh to him and that he isn't that bad, but I just can't really think of many reasons why. Like, it's cool that he can, for example, travel around the world. They definitely should have taken advantage of that in other episodes. He could have even visited Thomas on Sodor. Hell, he does go to Sodor, fun fact, but off screen, so like, what's the point? So it's cool that they introduced a character who theoretically could bring some more consistency into the other episodes and brought a familiar face there. But he doesn't do that, so all we're left is his role in Digs and Discoveries and the critically acclaimed episode Too Loud Thomas. I don't think I have much else to say about Stefano because I don't want to say too much negative stuff. So yeah. Anyways, back to most of the rest of this movie. The plot is there. It's very poorly structured, I think. I don't really want to think about it too much, so I can't tell you for sure if it's really structured because that would require me to think about it. What else is there to say? Yeah, bad fantasy sequences. The set design in this is super bizarre because they just completely ignore any like sort of logic in how a railway is structured. Like there are super sharp turns and super steep hills. It's insane. This feels like it's from All Engines Go. So yeah, I think I'm gonna put it at the top of F tier, which means above Mr. Island Rescue and above Day of the Diesels. So like, hooray, I guess that's slightly good. It's not the worst movie, but that doesn't really mean much. Do you know how much I would like to love the movie where Stefano appears? But I can't. It's so painful. I'm sorry, Stefano, but yeah, this just deserves F tier. And you, Stefano, you are saved. Now come along with me. We are going to Edward Station. Oh, and on our way, we are going to watch Steam Team to the Rescue. So it turns out that there's a couple of things in this that can be enjoyed. The song, mainly, and I also like how they use it twice. And also the fact that this is only 20 minutes long. I really like how they kind of experimented with the runtime, how they made Dixon Discoveries 40 minutes and this 20 minutes. It's really good because each story needs to have a different length, so the fact they were able to make it the length they wanted is definitely good. And it certainly makes these mini specials stand out a little bit more, so point extra there. And also, this is the first special since The Great Race to take place mainly on Sodor, and the first special since Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure to take place entirely on Sodor. Can you believe that? 4 years since the last fully Sodor special. So it's very nice that this could be kind of like a little bit of a return to tradition. And then everything else is just completely unlike anything that Thomas was supposed to be. This is another entry in the series of let's make Thomas and the Steam Team the main characters in universe as well. which is a terrible idea for many obvious reasons. For example, when there's like the final scene of all the engines working together, it doesn't really feel like it's anything special because it's not all the engines working together. It's just a couple of random guys who aren't able to have a good night's rest for some reason. Like, seriously, why couldn't they use more engines in the background? They use Edward, Henry, Toby, Rosie, and Stanley, and Caitlin, I think, in the first song, which is fine, but like, it's still mainly the Steam team in that song. They should just. That really should have been an opportunity to use as many engines as possible, because this is supposedly about all of the engines being busy, which doesn't really work as well if most of the engines can't even appear. Yes, there was a cast culling the previous year, I think, where they just got rid of several secondary and tertiary characters, and this is the result. The Steam team and the Diesels and a few other endos are the only guys who still exist, and it sucks. Another important thing I need to mention is the gimmickiness. By now, I'm used to it because of this and also because of All Engines Go, so it doesn't even like phase me that much. But back when this came out, it was a huge deal how, for example, Cranky was able to catch a falling crate with his hook. That just doesn't make any sense. And this special is full of these things which are just completely against like the basic laws of physics, I guess. And I'm not a really serious purist. I don't need like everything to be super realistic, but I want things to at least look like they make sense. Is that too much to ask? No, it's not. That's the answer. And also, they make a big deal of how Percy is too weak to handle dogs. First of all, that's bullcrap. And second of all, the movie contradicts that when it shows a large shot of the entire docks, which is full of tracks, which shows that no, Percy isn't incompetent. He actually managed to fill the entire docks with the tracks. The problem isn't Percy, it's that no one was there to take those tracks away like they were supposed to, but that's not Percy's fault. So, yeah. Regardless of how you take it, it doesn't make sense because Percy, of course, isn't that weak and shouldn't he be. And, yeah. There were some funny moments, like how Dan was suddenly panicking when the door started closing, but like. They were so pathetically funny that it just like wasn't really all that special, and yeah, I just don't know what else I can talk about. I think that's everything. Oh yeah, the fantasy sequences were again terrible. So I am gonna put it at E tier. Surprisingly, this is the first special so far that I've put in E tier. That's strange. Alright, now let's go to Marvelous Machinery. All aboard for a big adventure. Why? So, before I get into the many terrible things about this, I wanna mention the few brief good things that I kind of liked, so that I can get them out of the way first. There were like two good jokes. First, when Bernie thought there was a scrapyard called Sunny, and then when Gordon thought that saying OD in dignity would be an understatement to how he was splashed with milk. And it was kind of funny how Kenji was pretty much just a damsel in distress. And that's kind of it. So Marvel's Machinery has so many issues, like for example, the flying cars and the giant dancing robots, you know, just little things that only have those small teeny issues of not fitting into the universe at all. characters who sure exist, but like any actual personas, well, they look cool. Well, actually, no, they don't really. Kenji has almost nothing. Sonny is a extremely poor character. He's like evil at first, and so he acts mean, and then Thomas tells him he can be useful, and suddenly he changes his entire like lifestyle or something, and suddenly he wants to be good. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. Ruth also doesn't like fit. It's even those little things like how everyone calls her just Ruth and not Miss Ruth or Dr. Ruth or anything. That's just not how the engines refer to humans in this world. And Baz and Bernie, oh my god, they are easily the worst antagonists in a special. And the only decent thing about them is Baz's fashion style. Uh, the characters. Oh, and how could I forget? Thomas is once again a generic kid show protagonist who loves doing cool things. The Steam team is once again the center of the universe in universe, not just behind the scenes like to us, to the audience, but even to the characters inside. They are the main characters somehow. Uh, for some reason, they brought back the "oh no, we are going to be replaced" trope, which was already boring and uh, overused like 2 decades ago, and it definitely was annoying here. You know, it would be kind of interesting if the Diesels took the Steamy role because, you know, the Diesels haven't had that experience of are we going to get replaced or not yet, so it would at least make some sense for them here, but no. Thomas has to be the main character, as always. There's just the plot is there, but it's super disjointed. There's like random side plots about Thomas not being able to find Turkey because I don't know why. They make a big focus on how they need to work together, and then they just don't, and they declare victory anyway. Like no one does anything. They just pull some chains, and that's kind of it. I'm not sure what they were trying to achieve. Again, stupid fantasy sequences, and this somehow has the worst example of Ceratopum head being made into a buffoon in the entire series, which is an incredible achievement. They seriously made a haha the fat guy likes to eat food joke. That like did they not realize that slow hanging fruit? The chase has some cool shots, I guess, but overall it's stupid. Like there's so many things in it that don't make sense, and I don't mean just things like I don't know how I don't know how was Thomas able to steer the jet engine or something. No, I mean like how was he able to talk to Bess, who was inside Kenji? Like how could they hear each other? Things like that. Uh, yeah, and this whole thing just doesn't fit into the Thomas universe at all. And the soundtrack also is super terrible. It's in the style of, you know, things associated with modern technology and sci-fi, and it's super generic. Like, oh my god, it's so boring to listen to. So yeah, I think I'm gonna put it at F tier, below Dixon Discoveries. Overall, I'm not sure which of them is better, but at least Dix and Discoveries doesn't introduce flying cars and giant dancing robots into this universe. Yeah, it introduces Stefano, but even then, Stefano is somehow better than what this special came up with. And I think that's everything. I do at least like how there's kind of a continuity between this and some of the later season 24 episodes, even though those are also terrible, so like, what's the point? So yeah, FT below Dixon Discoveries, above Mr. Island Rescue, I think. Now let's go to Thomas and the Ariel Engine. Finally, something that could be at least a little bit good. Do you know how amazing it is to watch something that's actually good after sitting through Marvelous Machinery and Steam Team to the Rescue and Digs and Discoveries? Oh, I love it so much. And even better is that this is the end of the series, which means that it had the chance to end on a really good note after years of very, very bad episodes and specials. So, the thing I probably appreciate the most about this is how it's at the same time both special and also down to earth. It's special in the sense that it's about Thomas going to the mainland with the Fat Controller so that they could visit the Queen. But it's also down to earth in how, at its core, this special is just about Thomas taking a train. A very special train, sure, but a train nonetheless. And then they get into some shenanigans and minor incidents, and they finish their job on time nonetheless. And that's just amazing because, of course, the last few years of this franchise were about action and even more action and high speeds and even more action and gimmicks and everything. So the fact that it could end with something that's kind of similar to its roots is just amazing. And the second thing I really like about this is how well it shows Thomas being so special. Again, the last few specials and episodes, they were all about how Thomas is this super amazing engine. There is no one quite like him. He is the best engine ever. He loves action. He is the hero. He is brave. He's everything you could want. And that's just boring. But here, he of course is still like kind and all that. Not my favorite take on Thomas, but whatever. But what I really like is when he helps Duchess, he does it despite the fact that he's going to be late himself. And I think that's the best way to depict why Thomas is special, and this special does it. I also like how they gave an actual reason for why he's the main character this time. This one actually works really well, and yeah, I love it. I also like how well they handle the Fat Controller. Of course, it starts with him being kind of the comic relief character once again, getting spayed with mud and getting his suit torn. But then, when it's necessary for them to get up to speed, he just casually becomes Thomas's fireman and starts shoveling coal, even though he's going to get even dirtier. And again, that's such a great way to handle this. Uh, this special also has Beresford. That was a nice surprise. He doesn't really do a lot, and the scene with him is kind of like probably just for a plot. Like the way he confuses Thomas, it feels very, I don't know, contrived, I guess. And it's not even necessary because he could have just picked the wrong way on accident. But it's still nice to see him out of all the Journey Beyond Sodor characters, though I probably would have liked to see Marilyn more. And it's also weird. It's also really nice that we could see Beresford and the Fat Controller of all characters together. That was also a nice surprise, but I wasn't a big fan of how Topham was so chill with Beresford picking Thomas up. It was also nice to see a bit more of the mainland, and this time the kind of normal mainland, like we could see like a normal mainland station and its yard with a station master and some workmen. Just a normal part of the mainland, and again that's so amazing because we didn't really get that with Journey Beyond Sodor or with the Great Race, so this was really nice to see. It helps with making this movie feel more down to earth because we just come to a normal mainland station and not like, I don't know, the Steelworks, if you know what I mean. So yeah, and the Duchess, well, unfortunately she didn't get much to do, but she's alright. Her livery and face and boiler size are a bit weird though, but it's alright. There's also a few references to classic stories and events, and I can see why people don't like them, or at least some of them, but I don't think they really matter that much. And the soundtrack, the main theme of this movie is amazing. So yeah, that's about everything. I would rank it, I would put it at A tier. I'm not sure if below or above Blue Mountain Mystery. Right now I have it below, but I really like it, so I might change my mind later. If I'll do, I'll of course say it at the end of the video. But now, let's move to the All Engines Go movies. Specifically, its first one, Race for the Sodor Cup. I don't have Kana, so pretend that this is Kana. Alright, so when I watched this movie for the first time back when it first came out, I absolutely hated it, and a big part of that is that, well, I just wasn't used to all of the All Engines Go features like the wheel hands and the cartooniness and all of that. Now I'm more used to it, I even enjoy All Engines Go a little bit, and I think this is my first time watching it since it came out, so yeah, I had pretty much a almost new perspective on it, and I still didn't enjoy that much. It wasn't like too terrible, but it was kind of boring. It was very generic in a lot of places, and there were still some like elements that I really didn't like. I should probably describe the plot because I'm guessing that a lot of you haven't watched the All Engines Go movies. So the plot is that a race is happening on Sodor. There's three teams. Each team has two engines. Team 1 is supposed to be Kana and Kenji, but Kenji has an accident when he's trying to stop a runaway Kana, so he's out of the race, and Thomas takes his place. Team 2 is Verona and Federico, and Team 3 are Fenjiv. Those four are newbies, and they are very bad characters because they're just super extremely generic. Like, I can't describe how generic they are. They are really boring to watch. And also frustrating in Verona and Federico's case. They are the bad guys who cheat and who need to be taught a lesson. So yeah, Thomas and Kana are unsure in themselves because Thomas isn't fast, so he outtrains them, then everything's alright. And then there's the race. It's less of a race and more of a series of tasks which you have to complete around the island in the quickest time. And if and Jeff get trapped and Verona and Federico eventually crash themselves, so Thomas and Kana win. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like All Engines Go, then it's alright, I guess, but if you don't, then this is really bad, and even I didn't enjoy it, and I can handle All Engines Go now. I kind of like it, so yeah, I still didn't like it. So Hale is the main attorney, he's alright, he's still his old wise self. Harold and Bulstrode are also attorneys, and they don't really do anything, they are just there. But I'm certainly not complaining about more classic characters attorneying. Diesel was interesting in this. At first he was a fan of Verona and Federico, and then when he saw them cheat, he changed his mind and helped Thomas and Kana overcome the obstacles that Verona and Federico put in their way. The songs, the first one, When I Go Fast, was really good. Well, not really good, but pretty good, decent at worst. The second one was alright, and I've forgotten the third one even though I only listened to it last like 10 minutes ago. That tells you all about how forgettable it is. Anything else? Yeah, this movie is just boring, mostly. I wasn't really enjoying it that much. There are, of course, some classic leaps of logic, as is classic for All Engines Go. And again, I don't want to be too harsh to it. For that's just AG in general. But it still hurts the movie and the overall experience, and also the whole series. So, yeah. And anything else? Like, yeah, there were just things that didn't really make sense. Like, okay, so Kenji, a high-speed engine, can't compete in the race. Why is Thomas replacing him? Why not Gordon? They even established at the start that Gordon used to race in the Soda Cup when he was younger. So why can't he enter now? I don't think he can do worse than Thomas. Or Hero, well, yeah, Hero is the trainer, but Gordon could still be the racer, I'm sure. Yeah, I get it. Thomas has to be the main character, especially in All Engines Go, but still, wouldn't it be nice if a bit more logic was present? Then, of course, there's how they have to beat, because obviously Thomas and Kana can't win by being the fastest, so if and if they just get trapped after a bridge partially collapses in front of them for no reason, and Verona and Federico, they speed up because Thomas and Kana are catching up to them, and that causes them to derail. So Thomas and Kana are able to win. Yeah, it's just not that amazing. I would put it in E tier. I'm not sure if below or above Steam Team to the Rescue. Both of them feel kind of wrong, but you know what? I think I'm gonna put it below. Yeah, at least Steam Team to the Rescue had some like cool moments and an interesting premise. Also, last thing I wanna say, this movie is not a ripoff of The Great Ace, as some people think for some reason. The plots are almost completely different. Just because the movie is about acing doesn't mean it's a ripoff of The Great Ace. Come on. So yeah, E tier below Steam Team to the Rescue. Might change my mind later. I'll tell you about it in the end. Now let's go to the mystery of Lookout Mountain. Again, please pretend that this is Darcy, because I don't have any toys of Darcy, so I have to use this. So, when I first watched this movie back when it came out, I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. Well, not that much. I ranked it in like the middle of all the movies, which isn't really that great. But compared to the previous movie, it's a lot better. And the reason for that is that its second act is quite a lot of fun. It's just about the engines exploring this new place that we haven't seen before in any version of Thomas, and because it's All Engines Go, a cartoon, it can be almost like anything. So it really is like an adventure for us too. And I also appreciated how they didn't do anything too crazy, like, I don't know, a loop-de-loop. It's just normal railway infrastructure, like a turntable, for example. Just in a place where you probably won't see it, which is deep underground in a mine. So it's still like somewhat normal, but also unique and exciting. So that second part was alright. The plot of this movie is that Thomas and Percy discover strange things like earthquakes and disappearing tracks in the old mines. Whiff tells them that there is another mine underneath the nearby Lookout Mountain. The engines theorize that the two mines may be connected, so they split into two teams. Each one explores a different mine, then they meet up underground, then they meet Darcy, and they help her get new beams which could strengthen the tunnels she's digging, which were the source of the earthquakes. And that's kinda it. But it's alright. The movie's issues are mainly in the first and third act, and one of them is how much they keep bringing up this supposed mine monster. So obviously the only logical source of earthquakes and disappearing tracks is a monster which doesn't eat tracks, because the tracks keep reappearing. And I can't overstate just how much they keep bringing it up. Like, even when the conversation steers into something else, like whether there is only one mine or not, someone once again brings up the mine monster. And it's just annoying, because obviously there's not gonna be any mine monster, and it's just the average kid show, mine monster? Ah! I don't like monsters! Ah! It's just not fun to watch. The third act has it too, because that's where they find Darcy, and there's like a few minutes of them just screaming and running and screaming, ah, mine monster! And we knew before that, of course, there's probably not gonna be a mine monster, but now that we know it for sure, it's even more annoying. And then they resolve this, like, 50 minutes in, which means that there are still 10 minutes remaining, and a surprisingly long amount of part of that is just them talking to Darcy about the mine, which is boring. Like, it feels like the movie should have ended by now, and they're just padding it so that it can be the 1 hour long, and then they like sing a song, and then Topham also wants to talk to Darcy because he haven't seen it in a long time, and then he wants to give them the flag for finding Darcy, and it's just it's just over when the movie should have ended. I definitely would have liked to see more of the exploring stuff because that was lots of fun. This movie has two attorneys, no newbies. It has Darcy, she's there, but her entry looks pretty accurate, which is nice. And then there's Swift, who is great in All Legends Go. He's one of my favorite characters, and he's better than his TV series version. So yeah, I'm definitely glad for him to be here. And as for the rest of the characters, I think that they are alright. Surprisingly, I don't even think Percy was the one who complained the most about the monsters, I think. Which was nice to see, but instead it was Diesel, which wasn't nice to see. Sandy was once again lots of fun. Kylie was nice too. Yeah, all the characters were fun. Many like contributed somehow to everything. There's also a side plot about Percy losing his machine. He has a machine on the track. I'm not sure what it does, but he has it, and he loses it in the mine. So they look for it, and I think it helps them find that. So something, I'm not sure. And yeah, as for the songs, I don't remember them. They probably weren't really that good. I think that's everything. So how I would rank it, I would put it probably at D tier, but I'm not sure if I should put it above Big or Big Adventures, below Hero of the Rails, or between them. For now, I'm putting it probably between them, but I'm not completely sure. I'm gonna have to think about it probably more. Alright, now let's go to the Great Bubbly Build, and I haven't seen it along with the movie after that, so this is going to be very interesting. So the reason why I didn't watch this when it came out is that when it came out I was already planning this retrospective, and I thought it would be fun if I waited to watch this until I started working on this video, so that I would have fresh thoughts. So the plot of this is that Carly and Sandy figure out they have differences in what they want their creations to be. Carly wants to make things that function, and Sandy wants to make things that are fun. And then they need to build a new washdown after the old one breaks down. So Sandy builds something that doesn't work. Then Carly builds something that works but isn't fun. And then they figure out they need to work together and create something that both works and is fun. So it's I guess, simple premise, but it works. It was pretty fun actually. I liked it. So I liked it definitely more than the previous two movies. And this isn't really like a movie, this is just a half-hour special. And it's also interesting that this was released on YouTube. I think exclusively, It's interesting that they put it here for free. I guess so that it was basically advertising. Interesting idea. What I also found very interesting is that Thomas, for once, isn't the main character. Carly and Sandy are. This is a special all about them. Of course, the other ones still appear, but you know what I mean. That's very interesting, and it's especially interesting considering that this is a special. Like, and even in the episodes, Thomas is usually the main character. Not so much now, but actually, I'm not really sure how much he's still the main character. Like, never mind. He's still the main character, but not as much as he was in season 1, so whatever. That's all important. So, I think that what I enjoy the least about this is that when it was revealed what the conflict of this was gonna be, it became kind of too predictable, I guess. Like, you just knew that, oh, they would figure out that they need to work together, and I don't know, there's just something that I feel like they should have already known. Like, yeah, of course you need to work together. If the engines want a washdown that works and one that's also fun, then of course it's going to need both of them. Like, I get it, this is for younger kids, and these kind of things probably aren't as obvious, but I don't know, it still wasn't perfect how they handled this. But again, it was still fun to watch, and that's most important. This is a small nitpick, but the scene where the conflict was, I guess, created, that was kind of a little bit too long. That was, I think, my least favorite part of the movie. It was just a bit boring. And after that, yeah, it was fun. It was just the engines doing, well, not usual engines things, usual all engines go things, which is fine. They weren't like, I don't know, creating a something nonsensical. They were just building a washdown with which had a lot of nonsensical things, but even before that they were just like chugging along and picking up boxes for the washdown or something, so it wasn't, I guess, too nonsensical, which helps a lot because again I don't want to hold these things much against this show, but it still hurts a bit. And also something interesting, the full main cast doesn't appear. Kana and Bruno are missing. I'm not sure why, but they are. And yeah, we get other characters too. We get Salty, we get Whiff, we get Tess, and Cranky. I'm kind of running out of things that I could say. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Of course, it wasn't perfect, so I'm gonna put it at like the bottom of B tier. So it's definitely on the better side. Not amazing, not perfect, but still pretty good. And the bottom of B tier means that it's below Calling All Engines. Alright, now let's go to the last movie, and the last one I haven't watched. The Christmas Letter Express. Or Christmas Letter Special? I'm not sure, I'm gonna have to check. And now we've reached the final movie that's currently out, and also the second of the two movies which I haven't seen yet. So, what, like with the Great Bubbly Build and the Mystery of Lookout Mountain, I enjoyed it even more than the previous special. It was really fun to watch. The plot was kind of, I guess, lackluster. The plot is that Percy loses one of the letters for Santa, and so the main cast tries throughout the movie like several things to get Santa's attention. Like they try lighting up the mountain, they have to look for replacement lights at one point because some of them don't work. They try to make a replacement gift when they think they can't reach him, they try to follow him. There's also some side plots, for example, about Kana helping James. Oh, sorry. About Kana helping James. About Kylie and Sandy looking for presents for each other. But it's interesting that those things kind of stay connected, except the Kana thing, but Kylie and Sandy's side plots are connected to the main thing, I guess. Like, it happens at the same time, but they also at the same time do the thing that everyone else is doing, looking for a Santa and all that, which was interesting. So, another interesting thing is that this is about all of the main cast. It's not just a Thomas movie or a Percy movie. Though Percy is, I guess, the closest thing to a main character, which is cool. We haven't had that since 10 years ago. But it's still mostly a Biggest Adventure Club movie. And another thing, this is the first movie in the entire franchise which is about Christmas. And that's very unique. I would have thought that would have happened way earlier, but it didn't. Like, I get it, Christmas movies are mostly marketable only in Christmas, but even then. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm not sure what else is there to say. Like I said, the plot was kind of lackluster. If you don't like, I guess, movies that are like this, where it's mostly just, I guess, things happening and they're mostly kind of normal, then you probably won't enjoy it as much, but it was fun. And The strangest thing is that they fully commit to Santa being Kael. Like, there's a couple times in the CJ series where they, for example, show Santa on screen or they talk about him, but that can always be ignored. Like, when he shows up, it's only at the end where no one sees him, and when the engines talk about him, well, you can just say that the engines think he's real. But no, here he is fully shown to be like a real guy who interacts with the engines and who has magical powers and all that. It's not a problem, of course, because this is how engines go, this kind of stuff works here, and I appreciate that they took the opportunity to do something the original series couldn't and shouldn't do. But it's still very strange, and he is also the first human since Topham had to be allowed to speak in Legends Go, which isn't a good thing. Humans should speak more often. But other than that, yeah, I guess I don't have much to say. No attorneys or new characters, that's also very unusual. We haven't had that since, well, no new characters since the last movie, and no attorneys since Magic Railroad. Well, the Grey Bubbly build, but I'm not sure how much that counts. And some of the Boba specials, I guess. Well, yeah, actually, it isn't that unusual, but even then, mostly when that happened, it wasn't a full-on movie, just a mini special. But that's kind of not important. As to how I would rank it, well, I'm currently putting it in B tier, below Tale of the Brave and above Calling All Engines. Maybe that will change. I'm gonna like go over all of the rankings and decide them and think them through. But right now that's where it is. And since I think that's everything, now it's time to have a look at all of the movies at once and how I would rank them in order. So, now that we're at the end, here is how I would rank them from best to worst. S tier, The Adventure Begins, The Great Race, Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. A tier, Blue Mountain Mystery, Thomas and the Earl Engine. B tier, Tale of the Brave, The Christmas Letter Express, Calling All Engines, The Great Bubbly Build. C tier, The Great Discovery, Journey Beyond Sodor, King of the Railway, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. D tier, Big World, Big Adventures, Hero of the Rails, The Mystery of Lookout Mountain. E tier, Race for the Sodor Cup, Steam Team to the Rescue. F tier, Dixon Discoveries, Marvelous Machinery, Mystery Island Rescue, Day of the Diesels. So overall, I think it was a good experience. The good outweighed the bad. Of these, I would definitely say that about half was good, maybe more, maybe less, I'm not really sure. And the best movies were usually the ones in the middle because the banner era. The worst ones were at the beginning and somewhere towards the end. But also the final movies were actually pretty good because all Engines Go movies were progressively getting better and better. I'm really looking forward to the next All Engines Go movie. If I had to pick one movie which best described all of the movies, and I don't mean all of the movies as individual movies but as a sum, I would pick Tale of the Brave because a major part of that movie is mid, just like how many of the movies are pretty bad or mid. But at the end, it's really good, really exciting, really unique and fresh. Just like how several of the movies also are exactly that. Not at the end, but in general. It has some weird takes on certain characters, but also some really good ones. So yeah, Tale of the Brave, I think depicts it well. It's also in B tier, which is near enough to the middle that it works out. And now I'm going to I'm going to quickly summarize each of the movie and why I liked it or didn't, this time from worst to best. Day of the Diesel, super frustrating, the characters were just terrible, no logic. Mystery Island Rescue, painful to watch. Marvelous Machinery, hurt slightly less, but it just doesn't feel like Thomas at all in a very bad way. Dixon Discovery, silly weak plot, really weak Thomas depiction. Steam Team to the Rescue, fun song, but, well, terrible everything, you all know why. Race for the Sodor Cup, incredibly generic. The Mystery of Lookout Mountain, Worse than I remember it, but still pretty fun, but let down by its many bad things. Well, not that many, but still several bad things. Hero of the Rails, incredibly overrated. Its typical Nitrogen era things, like the lack of logic and the narration, hurt it a lot. Big world, big adventures, great ideas, and sometimes nice execution, but overall still bad. Thomas and the Magic Era really bizarre, is held up by the love in it and all that, but it's still very not what a Thomas movie should be. King of the Railway, perfectly made, which I mean in a good thing, I don't mean that it's a bad movie. Jane and Beyond so worse than I remembered, but it was pretty good, like, it had good ideas and a good plot, but the overall execution just wasn't that great. The Great Discovery, yeah, I liked it, but it was kind of boring in the middle. The Great Bubbly Build, fun, but a little bit too predictable. Calling All Engines, yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot. It wasn't that terrible in regards to the usual hitter problems. Well, actually, in some cases it was, but whatever. The Christmas Letter Express, best All Engines Go movie, very fun. Tale of the Brave, mid throughout most of it, but amazing at the end, and that it just deserves to be in B tier at worst. Thomas Sanderell Engine, a breath of fresh air, and it's actually really good, but it still has like some issues, partially due to blah blah. Blue Mountain Mystery, amazing. Unfortunately, narrow gauge engines weren't handled that well, but it's still really good. So the Legend of the Lost Treasure, kind of weird at the start, but well, it's amazing, so of course it's at S tier. The Great Race, super funny, almost put it at the very top, and The Adventure Begins. Well, it's just The Adventure Begins, what more can I say? It's amazing. Yeah, I'm gonna also put like some text on the screen so that you can see exactly the ranking. My favorite newbies, I mean, I guess Diesel 10. I would say Spatter and Dodge, but I don't know. They don't feel like the right answer for this specific question because they weren't really the main newbies. They were just side characters. So maybe Diesel 10, maybe I don't know. Steven was a lot of fun. Stefano, but that's a bit personal. And Hero, I guess. A lot of these are in the first half. That's interesting. And favorite attorney, yeah, I really don't know. And so we've come to the happy end of our story. But now it's time for all of us to go home. Just like Thomas. Thank you all for watching.